Hi, Stacy. How are you doing? You're muted.
Good evening, Patrick. How about
Hey.
yourself? I'm doing fine.
No, I'm doing all right. Yeah.
You ready for the trip out DC?
Well, sorry, what was that?
I say, you ready for the trip out to DC?
I haven't even started getting ready. I
Uh-oh.
need to write the presentation for next week. Need to start packing and everything. Yeah, it's a lot that still needs to be done. Everything still needs to be done.
I'll wish you luck.
Yeah, thank you. By the way, you misspelled your name.
I did. I sure did. Best at the keyboard.
Oh, we got quite a few states here represented. Florida, Iowa, Colorado, Maryland, Northern California. Is San Jose Northern California or is it Central California? North Bay Area. So Northern California, I guess. Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for getting here early and making sure your equipment works. Still waiting on our guest speaker and then of course everyone else to show up. – 114 in Iowa. Geez. Okay. Glad I'm not there. Wow. That's a lot of ice and water. 1,300 pounds of ice, 300 gallons of water. Wow.
My daughter, I have faith she's gonna do good, but still, this surgery doesn't make the team. I would be so upset. So she really don't have no other option.
Hey, Carolyn, I made you co-host.
Okay, I'm in.
Oh, good.
Where's my picture? It's not showing.
I saw something for a second there. There you are.
How's everybody doing? My voice isn't so good, so I'll be sounding kind of scratchy. But as long as you can hear me okay.
We can hear you now, nice and loud. Does sound like you're moving around a little bit. We can hear that on the mic. I'm doing well, Carolyn. How are you doing?
Okay. Is that better? My voice better?
Yeah, you're perfectly fine.
Okay.
We are already live streaming this to YouTube, and at 7 o'clock, I'll go ahead and start the recording. But let's give everybody a few more minutes after that to get in, um, and start it around 7:02. Sound good, Carolyn?
Okay.
Carolyn, we can hear you moving around or moving something, so I'm gonna go ahead and mute you until you're ready. Go ahead and then mute yourself at that point.
You can hear me moving around?
Yeah, it sounds like you're moving, shuffling something or moving
Oh,
something.
I was just taking a drink of water. I didn't know the mic was that sensitive.
Yeah.
So you want me to mute myself?
Yeah, when you're ready, you can unmute. That way, while
Okay.
you're talking, everything's good.
Remind me in case I forget to unmute.
Okay. We'll give everybody about 4 more minutes to get in. We usually start this about 2 minutes after. Gives people time to connect right at 7 and then struggle through updating their Zoom and finally connecting. So bear with us. We'll get started shortly. It is 7 o'clock Pacific time. We're going to give everybody just a couple more minutes to get connected, and then we'll turn this over to Carolyn and she can get started. We got Indianapolis. We got our former Battalion 11 coordinator who's since fled to Hawaii. More Colorado. Welcome, everyone. Okay, it is 7:02 Pacific time. Hopefully everyone who has been struggling to get in has updated their Zoom clients and is now joined in. Carolyn, go ahead and unmute yourself, and I'll go ahead and introduce you. My name is Patrick Botts Forbes. I am the LAFD CERT Central Bureau Coordinator, CERT being the Community Emergency Response Team. And it was my privilege and honor to introduce you to my predecessor, our former Central Bureau Coordinator, Carolyn Burleson, who is our guest speaker tonight. This is our third Wednesday of the month continuing education training, and these topics are open to everyone every month, regardless of if you work, live, play, or train with us in LA City or visiting from other parts of the country, as many of you are. So thank you very much for coming out. And Carolyn, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be here tonight. Patrick introduced me. I'm a former Central Bureau Coordinator. I retired in 2000, what was it, 22, 20? I forget. Anyway, some time ago, and Patrick took over from me. He's been doing a marvelous job, and I appreciate all that he does, and I appreciate him allowing me to come back to make this presentation to you. Our presentation is going to be on solar storms, and let me share my screen and bring it up. And hold on one second. All right, can everyone see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I have to preface this by saying that I am by no means I'm not a scientist, nor am I an expert on solar weather. I just became fascinated with the auroras when back in May that we had a solar storm that created these magnificent auroras that were seen all the way down as far as Florida. And I just saw so many beautiful pictures, and I became fascinated with it and started doing some research and found out the sun can do us a lot of good. It can also do us a lot of harm. So I put together this little presentation, and I've got a couple of videos, one at the beginning and another one at the end, to introduce the concept. And my voice is not so good. I'm an old lady now. My voice is not so good, so you'll have to excuse me, but I'll do the best I can. Okay, I'm going to start with this video.
Have you ever wondered what happens when the sun throws a tantrum? As we navigate through solar cycle 25, which began in 2019 and is expected to continue until around 2030, we're entering a critical phase. This cycle features escalating solar activity, including solar flares, coronal mass ejections, and solar storms expected to peak this year or next. In this video, we will delve into the recent surge in solar activity, discuss the significant impacts these solar events can have on our planet, and explore advanced strategies to protect our technology and natural ecosystems from the sun's explosive temper. In recent weeks, we've observed a record-high sunspot count, the highest in over 2 decades, with a single day seeing up to 9 major solar flares. This level of activity marks a significant uptick as solar cycle 25 escalates toward its peak, anticipated to be higher and sooner than previous forecasts had suggested. Sunspots, the dark patches on the sun's surface, are cooler areas caused by disruptions in the sun's magnetic field. These spots are often the precursors to solar flares, explosive releases of energy that can send billions of tons of coronal material hurtling into space. The science behind these phenomena is rooted in the sun's magnetic fields, which twist and tangle over an 11-year cycle. As these fields snap back into new positions, they release immense energy that we observe as solar flares and coronal mass ejections, CMEs. The effects of these solar flares are not just spectacular to watch, but can have tangible impacts on Earth. High-energy photons from these flares can ionize Earth's atmosphere, disrupting the transmission of radio waves and degrading signals from GPS satellites. This can lead to interruptions in communication and navigation technologies that are crucial to many modern-day activities, from aviation to mobile phone operations. The term solar maximum refers to the period during the solar cycle when the sun's magnetic activity is at its height. It's during these times that we see the most intense and frequent solar flares and CMEs. This heightened activity can lead to more severe geomagnetic storms, which, in turn, can affect electrical grids and communication networks on Earth. The last severe geomagnetic storm, a result of such solar activity, led to spectacular auroras far from the poles and highlighted the disruptive potential of solar events. When coronal mass ejections, enormous clouds of magnetized plasma from the sun, hit Earth's magnetic field, they can induce powerful geomagnetic storms. The most severe of these can disrupt power grids by inducing currents that overload electrical infrastructure. A historical example is the 1989 Quebec blackout, where a geomagnetic storm left millions without power for hours. Today, with our even more interconnected and electricity-dependent society, the stakes are higher than ever. The economic implications of a major solar storm are vast. It's estimated that a single severe geomagnetic storm could result in economic losses of tens of billions of dollars globally. These losses stem from damaged power grids, disrupted satellite operations, and the cascading effects on everything from emergency services to financial markets. Moreover, the recovery from such widespread technological disruption could take weeks or even months, compounding the initial economic impact. Apart from technological disruptions, geomagnetic storms may also influence animal behavior. Animals that rely on geomagnetic cues for navigation, such as migratory birds, bees, and sea turtles, might display unusual behavior during these times. For instance, there could be disruptions in migration patterns or even daily travel routes as these animals attempt to recalibrate their internal compasses to the shifting geomagnetic fields. These behavioral changes are crucial indicators of the storm's impact on the natural world and can have cascading effects on ecological systems. Advancements in space technology, particularly with satellites like NOAA's GOES series, have significantly enhanced our ability to monitor and predict solar activity. These satellites are equipped with sensitive instruments capable of detecting even the slightest changes in solar energy output, which provides real-time alerts for solar flares and CMEs. As we approach the peak of solar cycle 25, it's important to understand the levels of the geomagnetic storms, as current observations and models suggest that solar cycle 25 could be one of the most active in decades. The NOAA space weather scales classify these storms into different levels, ranging from G1, minor, to G5, extreme. Each level corresponds to potential effects, such as disruptions to power grids and communication systems at higher intensities. The first level is the G1, minor level, where weak power grid fluctuations can occur, and minor impacts on satellite operations are possible. The most enchanting effect, however, is the increased likelihood of auroras near the polar regions, which may be visible at higher latitudes than usual. Moving to G2, moderate, to G3, strong levels, storms can lead to high-latitude power systems being affected, with potential transformer damage. The auroras become more widespread, occasionally visible down to mid-latitude regions. Finally, from G4, severe, to G5, extreme levels, storms are the strongest, which can induce widespread voltage control problems and protective system problems, potentially leading to extended power outages. Auroras may be seen as far south as Florida or southern Europe. These intense storms are rare, but can significantly disrupt modern life. So, the auroras, while beautiful, signify disturbances in the Earth's magnetosphere caused by these solar storms. Several tools and websites offer aurora forecasts and alerts. For example, NOAA provides forecasts about geomagnetic activity, which can help predict when and where auroras might be visible. Additionally, there are apps and websites dedicated to aurora predictions that take into account current solar activity and geomagnetic data to provide real-time or near real-time forecasts. Understanding the varied impacts of these geomagnetic storm levels helps in preparing appropriate responses. For instance, power companies might enhance grid resilience against potential fluctuations and surges during higher storm warnings. Wildlife conservation groups can monitor as well. Also, engineers and scientists have made significant strides in enhancing the resilience of satellites and power grids against solar storms. Looking forward, the integration of artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning into solar storm prediction models shows great potential for improving forecast accuracy. As a result, we're better equipped to prepare for and mitigate the impact of space weather on our critical infrastructure. As we've explored today, the activity of the sun, while a source of life, also poses significant risks to our modern technological society. Thank you for joining me in this enlightening journey into the power of the sun. Stay curious and stay prepared.
Okay, with that, we'll just proceed with this. Um, what we're going to be discussing here tonight are worst case scenarios. Normally, the sun does no damage at all. It just does what it does. It gives us light and gives us heat and helps us grow food and what we generally do and enjoy the sun. But when this ball of plasma gets active and then we're going into the solar maximum stage where it's going to be very active, and it can produce these solar storms that can do damage to the Earth. Okay, here is a scale model of the Earth as compared to the sun. You can see it's just a small dot in space compared to the size of the sun. And this right here is a solar flare that from one sunspot on the sun that peaks out these things, and it can produce these radiation that goes toward Earth. The solar storms are explosions of the sunspots that emit huge bursts of energy, and they produce solar flares and they produce coronal mass ejections, and they send streams of magnetic fields toward the Earth. Now, can you imagine a hurricane or tornado where the wind speed is like can reach up to 200 miles an hour and create a whole lot of damage? Well, the sun's wind speed goes 3 million miles per hour, and you could imagine what it can do. It's as far away as the sun is from us. It can produce these solar flares that travel through space and into our atmosphere. And if it's very strong, it can pierce through our magnetic shield. This blue purple line here, it represents the Earth's magnetic shield, and generally it deflects the rays of the sun so they can't do any damage. But when there's very strong uh, solar flares, X-class solar flares, or corona mass ejections are very strong, they can pierce through the magnetic shield of the Earth. And when they do, that's when it causes these auroras at the northern and the southern poles, and it can create geomagnetic storms. The geomagnetic storms are storms that happen within the Earth's magnetic field, and it comes as a result of the solar activity that manages to pierce through our magnetic shield. And these disturbances cause disturbances in the radiation belt, in the ionosphere, the upper atmosphere, and it produces these fantastic auroras. Beautiful, beautiful auroras. Back in May, like I said at the beginning, we had this solar storm, and it actually was from a G5 corona mass ejection that didn't quite hit Earth. And several X-class solar flares, which did hit Earth, and that's what created this magnificent sky dance that Mother Nature was doing for a couple of nights, and people all over were taking pictures of it. I just captured a few because I was just so fascinated with the beauty of it. But besides the beautiful auroras, it can also cause other damage. It can cause damages to our GPS system that cause them to go awry. It can cause damages to our communication system, to satellites, the human space exploration, the astronauts up in space, in the space stations. They go outside of the space station to do exploration and do repairs on the station and various things. But when there is a solar storm going on, they have to stay inside because they would be subjected to the radiation from those solar flares. And of course, that's not a good thing for them to be that close to it. It creates problem with the aviation, navigation, and of course, our power grid. The spacecraft operation, they have thousands of satellites that are up in the orbit, orbiting the Earth from various countries that send links up and down for us to get communications, and from the scientists to get communications. And back in February 2022, these were Elon Musk. You know, he has these Starlinks up in the orbit, and the corona mass ejection caused 38 of those satellites to deorbit, and they just flew out of their orbit, and some of them are just flying around in space junk. Some of them came back down to Earth, but they did a lot of damage to those satellites. It can disrupt, of course, like they said, it can disrupt the power grid. Back in 1989 in Canada, Quebec is a province twice the size of Texas, and it lost all of its power just from a solar flare. And it was out for like 9 to 12 hours that the power was down, and it wasn't from any kind of terrorist attack or anything like that. It was the sun that did that damage. And back in 2023, the same thing happened in South Africa and in Sweden with the solar flares. And it can also cause radio blackouts. Those of you who are ham radio operators know that the sun activity does affect the HF bands, and it can affect the bands that the maritime and the air aviation, it can affect their communication as well, just causing radio blackouts. And of course, the navigation system. Now, what's so important about this? At any given time, there's thousands and thousands of airplanes in the sky from various countries traveling back and forth, and people just on their way from one place to another. and they rely upon the navigation system to keep them on course and to keep a safe distance from one another so they don't collide. And these navigation blackouts can cause a lot of damage to the airplanes and their navigation system. And like I said, this is worst case scenario that I'm talking about. Doesn't generally happen, but I'm just talking about the possibility of what the sun can do. It causes also radiation storms and increases radiation levels for um, the radiation level that's in the atmosphere. And like I said, for the astronauts who are out in space and for planes that are flying high in the sky even can be subjected to the radiation levels from the solar winds. And I think I just covered that. Okay, how do we prepare for that? Stay informed, first of all. Monitor solar weather forecasts. You can do this from the NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They have a website that they do space weather prediction, and you can check with them and see what's going on with the solar weather and see if a solar flare is going to happen. They do send out notifications to let you know, and you can sign up for email notifications from NOAA, and you can also get a Space Weather Live app on your phone that will give you updates on geomagnetic storms. And then there's a website where you can check the current ham band conditions if you're a ham radio operator. Besides monitoring to finding out when the solar storms are occurring, when you learn of these things in advance, you can charge your devices to make sure all your electronics devices are charged up and have some kind of backup power to recharge them when they're needed. It's prudent to have a generator, some type of portable generator that you can use for recharging all of your electronics and anything that needs to be kept working during a solar storm, and it could be for a long time that you may need to use it. And keep a spare radio, antenna, batteries in a Faraday container. Faraday container blocks out the radiation from the sun or any kind of electromagnetic interference. And you can make one or you can purchase one. I have links on here that show you how to do it. And when at the end of the presentation, you'll get a copy of this and you can follow the links. There's several links on here you can follow and get more information. Protect your technology during a solar storm. Unplug your sensitive electronic devices, and unplug if you have like an antenna up on a roof or something like that, outdoor antenna. Unplug it from the radio base, and this will protect it. And if anything that you must leave plugged in, make sure it's plugged into a surge protector to protect you from devices from power surges. And of course, back up your data. Now we know that we can back up our data in the cloud, but you know the cloud is just someone else's computer somewhere. So if it affects ours, it could possibly affect theirs as well, even though they may be more protected than our individual computers. But back up your data in the cloud, but also on an external hard drive, so that you will have anything sensitive data that you need. You won't have to worry about losing it. Prepare your family, of course, have a plan. Develop a plan with your family like with any other emergency. In case of a power outage or other disruptions, how you're going to communicate with one another. Stock up on supplies that you may need, non-perishable foods and water, medications, lighting, sanitation supplies, and anything else you might need if you have to stay at home, and a go bag if you have to leave your home. One for every member of the family, of course. important documents, family pictures, household inventory on a flash drive, and of course cash. And here's another link for more information on preparing for emergencies that you could explore at your leisure. Staying safe during the solar storm. If you know a solar storm is coming, don't avoid flying, because the flying airplanes are subject to the radiation from solar storms that are at high altitudes. So you will be prudent to avoid flying, and also avoid subway tunnels. You don't want to get stuck in a subway when the power goes out. They have generators and stuff to get it back on, but in the meantime, you're stuck with a bunch of people, and Lord knows what could possibly go wrong with that. And credit cards or anything with a magnetic strip can be also affected. And of course, stay away from power lines. We know to do that. Any additional tips? Just stay calm, because the solar storms are unpredictable in a sense and predictable in a sense. They can, the NOAA can tell you what kind of activity is going on, but in the course of it, you never know what's going to happen. And the power grids, many of the places are taking, governments and commercial agencies are taking measures to strengthen their power grids, but that's not all over the place. It may be in some areas it may be well protected, in other areas may not be. So you don't know. So just be prepared for any kind of disruptions that may go on, and prepared to be able to communicate without it. And of course, you stay tuned to the news to see what's going on and get updates from your local authorities. And NOAA is the best authority to get the information from the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. They give solar weather predictions, and their site gives you that. I have a link on to that as well. In May of 2024, that's what was our most recent large solar storm. And there was actually an X-class solar flares and a G5 coronal mass ejection. And G5 was the strongest that can be, but fortunately it didn't hit Earth directly. We just missed the bullet by it, but the solar flares did hit Earth. And that's what caused those magnificent auroras. And it did cause some disruption some places around, especially in radio broadcasts. There was no major damage done from that, fortunately, but there's always still a possibility that it can happen. And so we want to be aware of what the sun can do and make sure we let ourselves be prepared for it. This one video here.
What if I told you that the biggest solar storm in 20 years has hit the Earth and we were very lucky? Despite this good news, astronomers are still on alert because the most violent solar cycle in a long time is not over yet. A gigantic sunspot has formed, similar to the one that caused a catastrophe in the USA 200 years ago. If the spot continues to grow, things could get tight for us. Either the storms still to come will bring us colorful auroras, or they will paralyze all our communications and power grids within minutes. Elon Musk has expressed his concern. On May 11th, 2024, the SpaceX boss posted an alarming graphic showing how much pressure the last solar storm had put on Musk's satellite system. A violent stream of particles from the sun had hit Musk's Starlink satellites and driven up the measured values for functionality and load. The satellite's protection mechanisms were stretched to the limit, and an even more violent storm could completely overwhelm or even destroy the technology. That would of course be a nightmare. Not only would regional internet and mobile networks on Earth fail, but it would also be a disaster if dozens or hundreds of junk satellites were floating in space. Musk went on to post that we have been lucky once again.
But he and his company are alarmed. Starlink satellites are among the most modern in the world, and it's a first test of how much the marvels from the SpaceX can actually withstand. Solar storms are considered the underestimated danger of the 21st century. Experts have long been warning of the one big storm that is coming, and that will put our entire civilization to the test. Particle streams that hit the Earth's magnetic field from the sun not only give us beautiful light shows, which we usually only see at the poles and know as auroras. What many people don't know is that the beautiful auroras are produced by streams of particles from the sun. The electromagnetically charged particles are captured by the Earth's magnetic field and then trapped in magnetic deposits above the two poles. In this way, the Earth's magnetic field normally prevents the particles from penetrating into the deeper layers of the atmosphere. At the poles, the particles are moved up and down in the depots until they have lost their charge. We see this as the honeycomb light shows. The strongest solar storm to hit us in 20 years caused auroras, or polar lights, to be seen much further south in the northern hemisphere, and in the southern hemisphere, people north of the polar region saw magnificent colors in the night sky. Auroras shimmer in green, purple, blue, orange, and sometimes red. If we believe the experts' forecasts, the exceptionally strong storms will continue for quite some time. Then, we'll be able to enjoy the colorful spectacle again, or we'll be in serious trouble. The most violent flares for 20 years. It's scary to think that the sun can unleash a gigantic stream of particles at any time, which will hit our Earth within 20 or 30 minutes. As soon as the particle bombardment is released, it has already reached us. That is the dangerous thing about these storms. The preparation time for a really violent flare is short. The streams are triggered by sunspots or coronal mass ejections. Sunspots are temporary areas on the surface of the sun that appear darker than their surroundings due to their lower temperature. They are caused by strong magnetic activity inside the sun, which suppresses convection processes. This causes the temperature to drop and extreme forces form in the affected areas. These can then lead to the release of large amounts of energy in one go and blow myriads of particles into space in a matter of seconds. A particular focus is currently on a sunspot group called AR 3664, where 16 smaller sunspots have come together to form a large eclipse. At the beginning of May 2024, the spot was so large that it was visible from Earth with the protection of solar eclipse glasses. The spot is 15 times larger than our globe and was responsible for the intense solar storms that distressed Elon Musk's satellites, among others. AR 3664 has produced 75 M-class and 10 X-class flares in just 1 week. M-class flares are in the medium range and X-class flares are among the strongest. On May 3, 2024, an X 1.6 flare was observed, followed by several more X-class flares, including an intense X 4.5 flare. These eruptions are significant as they not only release enormous amounts of particles that can reach Earth within minutes, but can also cause much larger coronal mass ejections. We are currently in a solar cycle that lasts about 11 years, and we are at the peak of solar activity. This 11-year cycle is characterized by extreme and sometimes difficult to predict fluctuations in solar activity. During the solar maximum, we can expect the most violent X-class flares, and we can expect the one big storm that experts fear. The current maximum also worries scientists because it has occurred earlier than expected. So something is wrong with the sun, and based on the recent activity of AR 3664, it is even suspected that the sun's magnetic fields are reversing, which could lead to even more frequent and intense geomagnetic storms. The last significant solar storms, known as the Halloween storms of 2003, reached G5 intensity and caused worldwide disruption to power supplies and satellite communications. Auroras were even visible in regions such as Florida and Mexico. Forecasts for the coming weeks indicate that AR 3664 could send us storms of 2003 intensity, so we need to be prepared. Right now, the spot is pointing away from Earth, and we are safe for a while, but soon AR 3664 will rotate back towards Earth, and that could bring another season of intense geomagnetic storms. For now, we need to monitor this sunspot group closely to minimize the potential impact on Earth and its technological infrastructures. Sparks flew from telegraph poles in 1859. Imagine looking up at the sky in the morning and it seems to be on fire. This is what people in the USA experienced around 1859. The Carrington event is the strongest documented solar storm in modern history. It occurred from August 28th to September 2nd, 1859, and was named after the British astronomer Richard Carrington. On the morning of September 1st, 1859, Carrington and his colleague Richard Hodgson independently observed an unusually bright flash of white light on the surface of the sun. This was probably the first time that astronomers had witnessed a so-called solar flare. This solar flare was part of an enormous sunspot region that triggered strong geomagnetic storm activity. The coronal mass ejection reached Earth within about 17.6 hours. This rapid arrival was due to the enormous speed and energy of the ejection. People all over the world saw the effects of the extraordinary geomagnetic storms. They produced spectacular auroras that were seen in Europe, North America, and even as far away as Cuba and Hawaii. In the southern hemisphere, the southern lights shone as far as Santiago de Chile and Queensland in Australia. In the USA, the Carrington event caused considerable disruption to the telegraph infrastructure, which was the most advanced means of communication at the time. Telegraph systems failed, sparks flew from telegraph wires, and the surrounding area caught fire. The consequences were fires and damage to telegraph equipment, which was dramatic at the time. Many telegraph systems were destroyed by the charges, while others ran completely without any additional power supply. The energy from the solar storm was enough to supply some devices with sufficient power. The effects on the technology of 1859 were dramatic, but minor compared to the risks of today's civilization. If a similar event had occurred today, the consequences for our thoroughly technologically dependent society would be fatal. Satellites, power grids, GPS systems, and communication infrastructures would be severely compromised, and it's estimated that the economic damage could run into the trillions of dollars. If such a storm hits us within a very short space of time, the failure of navigation and control systems could cause major accidents and disasters, particularly in air traffic and shipping. Particle streams, vital and at the same time extremely dangerous. The Carrington event shows very well that solar storms and coronal mass ejections are actually harmless. They do not harm us humans and do not destroy anything in nature. It's only our technology that causes problems. The Earth has probably already experienced thousands of these violent storms. Solar storms occur practically all the time due to the intense magnetic activity that is quite normal on the surface of the sun. These activities lead to the somewhat more harmless solar flares and to larger coronal mass ejections. A flare appears as a sudden, bright eruption of energy on the sun, resulting from the release of magnetic energy in the sun's atmosphere. This energy consists of light and high-energy particles and can be released as a small burst within a few minutes, or such a flare can drift out into space for hours. Coronal mass ejections, or CMEs for short, on the other hand, eject large clouds of magnetized plasma. Normally, such ejections are rather slow, and they reach the Earth within a few hours or days. In 1859, the energy of the CME was so great that the plasma cloud reached the Earth in less than 20 minutes. So this was truly an exceptional event, and yet we must expect such an unusual stream of particles to hit us again at any time. That can be worrying. Particle streams can be dangerous for us, but they are actually good. The streams consisting of protons, electrons, and heavy ions are practically omnipresent. They contribute to space weather, carry energy through space, help shape our climate, and the virtually continuous flow of charged particles emanating from the sun's outer atmosphere forms the heliosphere that envelops us and protects the solar system from interstellar cosmic rays. Without these particles, we would be unprotected from the intense radiation of the cosmos, and life would very probably not be possible. If we want to protect ourselves from this actually harmless and even good natural phenomenon, we need to safeguard and improve our technologies. Is it possible to protect against solar storms? Did you know that all modern satellites are built to be extra resistant to space storms and flares? Modern satellites and power grids are already designed to remain resilient to strong electromagnetic fluctuations. However, this only applies to a small proportion of satellites and power lines so far. Many networks and devices are still outdated and are more likely to give way in the event of a strong storm. Governments around the world are therefore also concerned and are taking the threat seriously. Electricity companies are constantly working on new technologies to protect their grids, substations, and power plants as much as possible. A prominent example of a storm that paralyzed an entire power supply is the geomagnetic storm of 1989, which hit the Quebec region in Canada in particular and paralyzed the entire power supply there for a whole day. Satellites orbiting the Earth are the most exposed to the sun's high-energy particles. The same also applies to the International Space Station, the ISS, and the spacecraft that supply it. The particles can damage electronic components and lead to serious malfunctions. In space, even minor accidents or failures can quickly become life-threatening, which is why Elon Musk and NASA fear storms like these.
Okay.
Have you ever wondered what happens when the sun throws a
go away.
tantrum? As we navigate through solar cycle 20.
Sorry about that. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation, just to let you know the power of the sun, what it can do, and what we can do as individuals to prepare ourselves. Basically, the main thing is governments have to do that job because it's such a huge job for the infrastructure. But we just need to be aware that this kind of hazard is possible. We think about earthquakes and tornadoes and hurricanes and various wildfires and that kind of thing, but very little thought is given to the sun and what it could possibly do. And just this recent solar storm that we had back in May was just a reminder of that, and that the sun is in its solar cycle, and it's reaching solar maximum between now and 2025. So that just be aware that the sun is in high activity and it can produce these solar flares and coronal mass ejections, and it doesn't do harm to you or us as individuals on Earth, but it can affect our technology and it can definitely affect our way of life. So that's my presentation. Like I said, I'm not a scientist, but I just started researching this information when I became fascinated with those beautiful auroras and discovered there's more to them than the beauty. And with that, I'll leave it open for questions or comments.
Thank you, Carolyn. I actually do have a question. This was the presentation is amazing. Lots of information here. And it sounds like this can be very bad if we get one of those, like the Carrington event today. But obviously, we've had these before. We've had several ones that were near misses. Is this something that obviously we should prepare for, but I mean, do we need to be paranoid about it? Is this something we should all go out and buy Faraday cages and put our technology in there? Or is this something that realistically is not likely to cause a devastating outage to us in our lifetime?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I would say to be prepared if you can have a Faraday device, a Faraday container that you can put a spare radio in and batteries and whatnot, and just keep that on hand in case the other communication goes down. The sun wouldn't affect the smaller devices. It would affect the larger devices in the power grid, and it may affect antennas like up on a roof or somewhere. But a smaller handheld device you could put in a Faraday container. You can make one or you can buy one and just have it as an extra thing, just as you would have extra supplies in your emergency kit. I cannot say that the sun is reaching its maximum stage. It goes through these cycles, 11-year cycles up and down, and it's currently reaching solar maximum, and that's when the highest solar activity can occur. And when those giant X class, I think the X class goes up to 10 X's or something like that, and the corona mass ejection, the highest one is the 5 G5, and we actually had that in May. We actually had a G5, but it just missed the Earth. But if it had hit the Earth, it would have been like the same as the Carotene event back in 1859, was it? And only worse, because we are now dependent on electricity and our electronics so much more. But it's not something we should be paranoid about, because it's just not something that happens everyday occurrence, and it's not seasonal like earthquakes. Not like earthquakes, I mean like hurricanes or tornadoes or something like that, but just something you should be aware of, the possibility, and just like everything else, have that on your radar as something to prepare for.
All right, there are some questions here. One of the questions is, and this was one of mine as well, is it safe enough to just pull the battery out of the radio, or do we actually need to put the radio in the Faraday cage without the battery in it?
I don't know. I'm not going to say, I'm not going to say, because I really don't know. I have a a radio in the Faraday cage, but I took the battery out separate from the radio. But I have the radio and the battery and extra batteries actually in there. And I have a laptop, an old laptop, and an old cell phone that I could just use for a tablet if I needed to, and the radio, a couple of little Baofeng radios, and I have yeah, and antennas that go with them. But I just put them in there to as part of my emergency kit. That's what that is for me. And my other radio, of course, stays on my desk, and it's attached to an outside antenna. So if that goes down, then I'll be just stuck with the small ones. But that's better than no communication at all.
All right. Few people are asking about is it possible to get the slide deck? You had a lot of links that were there as well that obviously didn't really translate over to, being clickable for people. Are you able to share that slide deck with everyone?
Yes, I'll send it to you, and you can send it out to everybody.
Okay. All right, then
There's a lot of very good information in those links that you can take time to explore.
all right. Let's see. Someone was asking about bags. I'm not sure. They're Faraday bags, or are these anti-static bags that Toast is asking about. Toast, do you want to ask that question?
Yeah, they do make Faraday bags. You can buy them on Amazon. They make big ones that you can actually put what do you call those things? They're generators. They make them big enough to put generators in, and then you can get smaller ones for putting in radios or smaller devices. And there's a link on there on how to make one, and there's a link on where to buy one. So it's all in part of the presentation.
All right. And someone's asking, Phyllis is asking, will radio stations be on the air if solar storms are strong enough to disrupt batteries?
That we don't know until it happens. Because if it's strong enough, they could possibly throw the radio stations on there. It depends on how their particular infrastructure is fortified, and so I cannot answer that. We'd have to just wait and see what happens there.
Okay. I assume that um, a solar storm or coronal mass ejection is going to hit one area of the globe, not everywhere. So we would have like Quebec got hit and the US got hit 200 years ago, but it's not a global outage. It would be something pretty specific, localized to maybe an eighth of the globe or something like that. Is that your
Yeah, all the ones that we've had so far have been uh, area specific. It might be a wide area, but not the whole globe. You'll find a whole lot of stuff on the internet that says the Earth is going to be destroyed by this and that thing, the whole power grid all over the Earth, but that's not very likely. But regionally, it could happen right where we are.
Someone's asking, Thomas is asking, I'm sorry, Sue Ellen is asking, um, a metal trash can that be substitute for a Faraday cage?
If you not just the can itself, you have to line it. You have to line it with cardboard and foil. There's a way to make it into a Faraday cage, but just the can by itself won't do it.
And is a household microwave a Faraday cage?
It's the same with that. You have to make sure all the areas of the microwave are anything where leakage could happen. They have little holes inside the microwave. You have to cover them with foil and cover them with tape and make sure they're all covered up. But yes, you could use a microwave, but not just a microwave by itself. You have to doctor it up some. But there's a link in the presentation. It shows you how to do that.
And Sherry pointed out that a microwave is designed to keep EMR in, not out. Um, she mentioned EMR before. What does EMR stand for?
Electromagnetic radiation. I'm assuming that's what it.
Gwendolyn is asking, will our vehicles be affected?
Yes, vehicles that are electronic, and most of the modern day vehicles are electronic. Yes, anything electronic can be affected by it. Yes, but
So
like I
anything with,
said,
go
these
ahead.
these are worst case scenarios. It's not something that happens every day, but it's just something that is a possibility to be aware of. But anything electronic can be affected by it. Yes.
It's anything with a computer chip,
Mhm.
but cards from, say, the 60s, um, those would be unaffected.
Yeah, the older vehicles would be unaffected because they don't have, they're not, they're not run on computers like modern day. Everything modern day is electronic, but the older vehicles aren't.
And Stacy's asking, are electronic devices that are turned off free from damage from a solar incident? I think I already know the answer to that, but Carolyn, go ahead.
If they're turned off, as long as they're not plugged into anything.
I think that we were talking about the radios without the battery connected could still be affected, and that's why you put them in the Faraday cage still.
Uh, I put him in the Faraday cage just to make sure I have something on hand that's not this. Well, I'm not sure. I'm like I said, I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to try to be an expert on this field, but the purpose of putting a radio in a Faraday cage is to have it protected in case something, my larger radio that I have, I have an HF radio. I know that would probably be affected because it's connected to an antenna that's outside that can destroy it. But the smaller devices, they say, the smaller devices are not likely to be that much affected as the larger ones.
And Sherry in the comments is saying that just turning off a device will not protect it. So
No,
anything, everything
not
electronic can be affected.
yeah, not just turning it off, but unplugging it, disconnecting it from the power source.
Okay. If anybody has any questions they want to ask Carolyn, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll call on you and you can ask your question. Gwendolyn is asking, do they have something to protect vehicles, a Faraday for cars?
Not that I know of.
And Pierre is clarifying that unplugging it will not protect it, and I think it's because the radiation will still be able to hit the electronics itself, even if it's not plugged in, not powered on. So you do still need to protect it, even if you do have it unplugged or the battery disconnected.
Yeah, that's the purpose of the Faraday cage.
Sue Ellen says she painted the interior of her trash can with a rubber-based paint and bought metal tape to seal it after filling. And Toast is saying that a battery in an old car could be affected. So since the older cars don't have electronics, don't have computer chips in them, disconnecting the battery would protect the vehicle from solar storm. So I think what we're saying is that while we shouldn't be necessarily paranoid about this, and in the video Carolyn shared said that the the radiation does not, or the coronal mass ejections don't affect living things on Earth, people, livestock, or plants. It's the electronics that they affect. That paying attention, being aware that such events could happen, um, and maybe adding NOAA solar storm reports to our daily feed, so we're aware of the possibility of something like this, would give us enough time to put our electronics into a Faraday cage, disconnect the battery in case there is such an event that could affect our systems. But being paranoid on a day-to-day basis is not something that we necessarily need to worry about for this.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's like I said, these are worst case scenarios, and it's just not. It's not. Just, ordinarily, we just go about our day and enjoy the sun, and the benefits of it. And there, but just to know that there's a possibility with the sun reaching its solar maximum, they call it the stage when it's most active, which we are heading into now. That is just something that we should be aware of, but of course not paranoid about, and just and the worst case for us would probably be a power outage, maybe a long lasting power outage, and just be prepared for that.
Cynthia's asking, will the news warn us if there's danger of solar flare damage or get information on our cell phones before the solar flare event? Considering we had this in May and they talked about the aurora borealis reaching down this low, they they're not going to want to they're not going to want to panic people. So they're
Right.
not going to warn everybody, take your batteries out, put your electronics in a Faraday cage, because most people don't have Faraday cages. Um, so it's unlikely that we're going to get any real warning from the news. Um, at least the mainstream news, something on TV, on the radio. We're not going to get warnings on our cell phones that this is a possibility of happening.
Yeah, there is an app that you can get on your phone to download that will give you warnings and updates on corona space weather and what's going on with the geomagnetic storms. And of course, and you can sign up for email with NOAA, and they will send you out warnings also. And if you check the links on the presentation when you get it, there are a lot of links with good helpful information, a lot more than I can tell you specifically. Like I said, I'm not a scientist or a solar weather expert, but I just found that it it, it just caught my attention, so I thought it would be something worth sharing with everybody.
Yeah, Toast posted, I don't know if this is a private message just to me, the link spaceweatherlive.com, and there's a Aurora alerts that I guess you can sign up for there.
Hmm.
Pierre said that EMR goes through stuff. The Faraday cage diffuses the EMR away from what's inside. So it sounds like it won't get 100% protect everything, but it will reduce the chance of your equipment getting damaged by EMR or EMP. Um, and he also said that it is a low probability event, and I think we're talking about low probability, much lower than the big one hitting Southern California. But if a coronal mass ejection causes electrical grid outages, we might be without electricity for a long time, especially if it hits a wide area such as Southern California. The um, the amount of work that will take to get the grid back up and running, it's not going to be hours. It will be, I'm sure, days, if not weeks. It will take a huge amount of work. But of course, we know that there will be a huge effort to get that back on. It's not like um, they're going to take their time doing it.
Right. And the governments are aware of the possibility of the sun damaging the grid, and they are taking measures to strengthen the grid against the solar flares. And of course, like you said, it's not everywhere. Some places are more strengthening than others. You know, just depending on how much money they want to throw into it. That's basically what it is.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is worst case scenario, and the likelihood of the worst case scenario is extremely low. It is still possible, but it is extremely low, and just us being aware of it and having heightened awareness when the sun is particularly having some violent explosive diarrhea is a good thing. Just know that this is a possibility, and that in and of itself makes us more aware and better to respond versus, hey, all the lights just went out and our radios don't work and our cell phones are fried. Now what are we going to do? And panic will ensue.
Hmm.
There was a good,
And the fact that you can monitor it. There are websites that you can monitor the solar activity, space weather, and that way you know when something's going to happen. They let you know in advance when a solar flare is going to hit, because the people who study, the scientists who study space weather, they can tell you uh, what the activity of the sun is doing. And so if you can monitor it yourself and see what's going on. But just know, like Patrick said, this is worst case scenario. It's not something that's likely to happen, but it's not something that can't happen. That's, you know, there is a possibility, if not a probability.
Yeah. Uh, One person's asking about what about insulin pumps? PJ is asking, what about insulin pumps and pacemakers? Might they be affected? And if so, what can be done to protect the person with those implants?
Well, anything with electric chip in it, electronic, can be affected. That's, how they work specifically. I'm not the expert, but I do know that it can affect anything electronic.
And that Space Weather Live website I mentioned earlier apparently costs $3.99 a month. Thank you, Phyllis.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other questions for Carolyn? Please go ahead and raise your hand or put it in the chat. All right, then I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. Thank you for Carolyn, our guest speaker. It's great to see you and hear you, Carolyn. Um, I miss your training. Carolyn is a retired teacher, so we got the benefit of um, hearing someone with a lot of experience teaching us about this. So thank you, everyone. We do this every third Wednesday of the month. We don't have a topic yet for August, but as soon as I either find a speaker or come up with a topic, we'll post that up on Eventbrite and share it on our various pages. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you for having me.